Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Fifth Child podcast, where I, your podcaster Chris, give you two different recommendations for either video games, movies, anime, or television series, depending on what kind of entertainment I want to talk about for this week. So, as I have been saying for these last couple episodes, you're going to see a little bit of overlap with the recording. All of this is getting recorded around the time that Fire Emblem The Three Houses releases, which I want to dedicate a full episode to. Also been getting kind of busy with work and everything, so these episodes will be a little bit shorter. But again, that's kind of a boon for you guys, that you get a shorter episode that's a little bit more concise in its recommendations. So I always say this, but again, like, comment, subscribe if you like what you see and listening here. And just make sure to make sure that you stay up to date on every new episode. Hit the ringer bell in the description below if you're on a mobile device. That way you know whenever every single new episode comes out every single Friday at 12 o'clock in the morning or 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And if you want to support the channel even further, please go ahead and go down to the Patreon down below. Any bit that you have a month will help get this channel growing even further. So for today's episode, I have two different recommendations. I have a recommendation for an anime and a recommendation for a video game. So I'm going to go ahead and change it up a little bit. We're going to talk about the video game first, because I have a little bit less to say about the video game. The video game that I'm going to talk about for today is going to be the first two games in the Ys series. That's spelled Y-S, but pronounced Ys. So the Ys series is actually one of the oldest JRPGs around. The first Ys game was actually originally released for the Sega Master System, the NES, originally in Japan back in the day. And it's created by Nihon Falcon. The Falcom team is well known for both the Ys series and the Legend of the Hero series. Some of the most underrated JRPGs around. I've actually played a little bit of the Legend of the Heroes Trails in the Sky, and I've dabbled in the Ys series every so often. I have bought all three of the main. I've pretty much have bought all of the main games for the Vita, and I've only just played a little bit of Ys 7, and I just recently bought the latest Ys game, Ys 8, for the Switch, even though I haven't played it yet. I wanted to kind of play the series from the very beginning and see how much the series has gone from there, and I think that's a great perspective, because the game has certainly, the game series has certainly evolved since its original inception, so I think it's a good way to figure out exactly how much the series has grown from there. So the first two games in the Ys series I'm going to be talking about are Ys 1 and Ys 2, which I played the PlayStation Portable port of the game. So the PlayStation Portable port of the game is called the Ys Chronicles, Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles, which is updated remakes of Ys 1 and Ys 2, based off of the Ys 1 to Complete series that was released for the PC Engine, the TurboGrafx, the original TurboGrafx compilation, TurboGrafx CD back in like the early 90s. So the first two Ys games, as I said, were developed by Nihon Falcom and were originally developed in 1989, and then were eventually reported for multiple different consoles before finally finding its home again on Windows and Sony PlayStation Portable consoles. The Ys series itself is kind of a weird series, because there's no overarching story except for the first two Ys games. Going into the concept of what the Ys series is, the Ys series mainly follows this adventurer known as Adol Christian, who's kind of an adventurer who just randomly finds himself in a new land or a new continent every single story. I haven't played enough of the Ys series to realize if there's an underlining backstory to Adol himself. Adol himself is kind of a blank character who just finds himself in a new location in every single game. And the first location he finds himself in the first Ys game is a continent known as Esteria. So Adol is the way the story starts is that Adol is on a ship, and then his ship he gets shipwrecked, and then he finds himself in a little town known as Barbado, in the middle of in the middle of this random continent known as Asteria. And the continent itself, Asteria, is overrun by monsters and terrorizing the town folk there, while there's a darker plot going on in the background. And all Adol is trying to do is trying to survive and learn more and more mysteries about this continent, while also figuring out about another random world, another continent known as the continent of Ys, which had for some reason vanished off the face of the earth. So the first plot of the first Ys game is just Adol trying to explore this continent of Hysteria, learning more about its secrets, learning about the secrets of Ys, and then eventually, and when we get into the second game of the Ys series, he actually finds himself on the continent of Ys, where the plot does grow a little bit deeper, and then you find out about this war between demons and the two goddesses of Ys, and Adol finds himself in the middle of this war between demons and goddesses. So that's the general plot of Ys 1 and 2. From what I've heard, all of the Ys plots are these self-contained kind of stories that are very simplistic and not too incredibly deep. They're not incredibly story-rich games. They're very simplistic, and they get the job done. The main focus of the Ys series is in the gameplay. So the Ys series has developed itself more in terms of how it plays throughout the years, and the way that it originally started off was originally just a top-down action game that's incredibly kinetic and very lightning fast. The best way that I can describe the combat and general gameplay style of Ys is that it's kind of like the original top-down Legend of Zelda series, but with a heavy dose of crack cocaine, particularly the PSP remakes. So the way that the gameplay of Ys starts off is the way that the gameplay of the Ys series starts off is that it's a top-down kind of side-scroller action RPG, where instead of having an attack button, you just basically move around in this top-down perspective, and you bump into enemies to deal damage with it. It's kind of like a bumper-style kind of gameplay, where you have to bump into certain enemies to lower their health, and the way you bump into it depends on whether or not that you are able to land a successful hit, or if they actually land a hit on you. So you actually have to kind of hit people you have to hit the monsters from the side or from behind them, or you kind of have to hit them off center. If you hit them directly on center, they'll deal some damage to you they'll deal some damage on you while you deal a little bit of damage on them. So you have to be very careful. You have to be very precise with how you're hitting people. And eventually, once you get in a nice flow of how the combat works, you're pretty much good to go. Now, the gameplay itself does evolve itself a little bit more. The first Ys game is a little bit, the first actual Ys game is relatively short, and I'm going to talk about that later. And it's very, very basic. In Ys 2, it's a lot more complex. You actually get a magic system that allows you to shoot fireballs, that allows you to have a shield, that allows you to transform, that allows you to warp to other locations. So it gets a little bit deeper as you go through Ys 2, and it does get a little bit more difficult and a little bit more complex. So that's it for the general style of gameplay. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the graphical style. So the graphical style for the PlayStation Portable, like I said, it's a top-down 2D perspective. There's some really, really cool sprite work, and a lot of the particle effects for the PSP version does look really good. For the most part, it more or less kind of looks like it's a really good-looking 2D PlayStation 1 game. So there's nothing really special about the overall look of the game. But it does get the job done. Where the series does get extra points is in the music. The music for Ys 1 and 2 is absolutely amazing. It's a relatively small soundtrack. There's your town themes, which are your nice little peaceful, semi-orchestrated arrangements, and then you have... Oh no, I think I might sneeze here in a second. I can feel a sneeze coming. I'm going to try not to sneeze. But you also then have your general field music, where you actually go along the field, and that's where you generally fight your monsters. and it's just a nice little mixture between a little bit of metal mixed in with some prog rock that's really awesome. The original soundtrack was developed by Yuzo Koshiro and has been rearranged for every single new compilation. And I believe Yuzo Koshiro did also rearrange the music for Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles, and it's extremely awesome. I've heard multiple other soundtracks in the Ys series, and I think they got better and better and better as they went along. But Ys 1 and 2 definitely has a soundtrack that holds up with time. So if you're gonna play the Ys series, I think the best way to really get yourself hyped up to play it would be to listen to some of the music, because it does work extremely well. So I'm going to talk about the enjoyment and playability of the game. So in terms of the playability, the games can get a little bit tougher. So if this is your first time ever playing a Ys game, I definitely recommend playing the easy mode first. Because like I said, this game is the Legend of Zelda series on crack cocaine. So that means that there's a lot of kinetics that go along. There's a lot of kinetic energy that goes along with the combat system, that if this is your first time ever playing a Ys game, you're likely going to get your butt handed to you multiple times as you're trying to get used to how this gameplay feels. So you definitely want to start off in the easy difficulty. Luckily, these games are not very long. I was gonna say this earlier, but I'll go ahead and say this now. If you're gonna play the Ys games, you do not want to just play Ys 1 and think, okay, I think I can play the rest of the games. You actually want to play Ys 1 and then go straight into Ys 2. There's a reason why this game was released as a compilation. Ys 1 actually feels like it's more or less an elongated intro to Ys 2. Ys 1's a good way to get yourself used to how the gameplay of Ys 1 is, or how the gameplay of the Ys 1 and 2 is, and then it jumps you off into Ys 2, which honestly is the majority of the game. For perspective, I finished the first Ys 1 game. I finished Ys 1 in about 3 or so hours, and then Ys 2 took me anywhere up to about 8 or so hours, so more than double that length. So if you're going to play these games, you have to play Ys 1 and 2 at least back to back. You can't play Ys 1 and then go play some more games in the series and then come straight back into Ys 2. You need to play Ys 1 and Ys 2 because there is an overarching narrative between these two games, just not between these two games and the other games in the series. So definitely play through 1 and 2 and then go see if you want to check out the other games in the series. In terms of how enjoyable this game is, like I said, it's a very simplistic story. There's not a lot of extra content to this game. As you go throughout the game, it's really easy to start level grinding and increase your stats and then get more gold so you can get more weapons. You get a stronger weapon, stronger armors, and stronger shields as you go along to it. So there's always a general sense of progression as you're going along to it. If I can think of a general flaw of the game itself, since it is a Legend of Zelda game kind of on crack, the one problem I have with the game is that unlike Zelda, there isn't a map. So it's really easy to get yourself lost in the game, especially in Ys 2 when a lot of the dungeons get much more labyrinthian in their design. So you definitely want to, if you're getting stuck in this game, I don't think that there's any problem whatsoever with looking up a guide and trying to figure out what to do. The game is very, very opaque in telling you exactly where you need to go next. So there's no problem whatsoever with actually looking up a guide and figuring exactly where the heck you need to go next. So with that, that's my definite recommendation for Ys 1 and 2. I'm probably maybe going to talk about the other games in the Ys series as I play them a little bit more. But I definitely recommend checking out Ys 1 and 2, at least maybe first, so you can kind of see where the rest of the series how the rest of the series has kind of expanded and developed itself even further beyond that. So with that, we're going to go ahead and switch gears and talk about the anime for this week's podcast. So the anime for this week's podcast is actually a currently running series right now. There's only been 13 episodes released so far for it, but thus far I do want to talk about this because this is quite possibly my favorite long-running series going on right now, besides JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and the newest season of Attack on Titan. And that series is Kimetsu no Yaiba, or Demon Slayer. as it's known in its English title. So Demon Slayer first aired on April of this year and is still currently ongoing. It's considered a spring 2019 anime, but since it's going on for about 26 episodes, so it's kind of more or less a summer series right now. So Kimetsu no Yaiba, or Demon Slayer, is actually a shonen. It's actually a shonen series based off of a shonen manga. I forgot the name of the original author. I think it's being released in... I believe it is being aired... I believe the manga itself is still running in Shonen Jump, possibly. I'll do a little bit of research on that as I continue through this podcast. But Demon Slayer... there we go. It is published in... Yeah, it's published in Shonen Jump. The author is Kiyoharu Gotaja, and it first started publication back in 2016 and is still ongoing, with obviously no end in sight quite yet, since it's still relatively ongoing. So Kimetsu no Yaiba, in terms of the actual story of it, takes place in relatively ancient times. We're going to go ahead and just say it's feudal Japan. It definitely looks like feudal Japan. So kind of like it has the same sort of general art style as, say, Princess Mononoke in terms of its placement and its overall setting. So like Princess Mononoke, the inhabitants of feudal Japan have to deal with these constant rumors and legends about demons that occasionally lurk in the woods of feudal Japan and come out at night to terrorize humans. And one of these inhabitants is a young boy known as Tanjiro Kamado, and his younger sister Nezuko, Kamado. So on a hunting trip, the young Tanjiro goes on a short hunting trip, and then he comes back, and then he finds his family completely and totally slaughtered by a demon, except his younger sister Nezuko. And then Tanjiro then finds out that the demon has infected Nezuko with the curse that turns a human being into a demon and turns Nezuko into a bloodthirsty demon. However, Tanjiro, still loving his younger sister so much, can't bring it upon himself to kill his younger sister. Can't bring it upon himself to kill Nezuko, and instead decides that he wants to free Nezuko from this curse. And even then, he can still find humanity in Nezuko, even despite the fact that she does still have these bloodthirsty urges to kill humans that these demons have. Tanjiro then eventually runs into fellow demon slayers who then decide that his resolve to not kill his sister, but also his resolve to try to cure his sister could be considered a worthwhile addition into the Demon Slayer Corps, a group of human beings who have decided that their main mission is to destroy demons once and for all and remove this curse from feudal Japan. So Tanjiro then decides to train himself with these demon slayers in order to become a demon slayer himself, in order to fight against demons while also still trying to find out a way to cure his younger sister Nezuko. Along the way, he runs into other demon slayers as well, such as Zenitsu, Inoyosuke, and Gio Tomioka. There we go. Got it. Nailed it. So that's it for the main story. Of Demon Slayer. The story overall for Demon Slayer is that it is definitely a shonen series, but it's a much more violent shonen series. And the way that it's paced and the way that its tone feels is that it doesn't feel like an overall shonen series. There's plenty of different shonen series that are still airing right now. For example, you got Fairy Tail, which more or less is a pretty well decently paced shonen series that uses a lot of the same tropes, but subverts enough to make itself feel ordinary. That makes itself feel unique. My Hero Academia, which I'll talk about eventually, is another shonen series, and is probably the best shonen series still running right now. Uses pretty much every single one of the main shonen tropes that Dragon Ball, Naruto have all used before, but uses all those tropes in the finest tuned aspects, and just fine tunes the aspects of shonen tropes to their utmost peak. That makes it feel as fresh and exciting as when we first saw them back when Naruto was first airing. And the way that Demon Slayer does it is that it uses all those same tropes, but it tells it in such a darker tone and with in a pretty concise pace that it makes itself feel nice and fresh and unique. So in terms of the actual characters themselves, Tanjiro is a really interesting main character, as is Nezuko. So Tanjiro himself starts off as a very, very inexperienced young boy who's kind of forced into adulthood. He's ultimately forced into adulthood because of what has happened to his younger sister. So in terms of his training, one of the best things that I think the series does is that it completely glosses over the entire training arc that Tanjiro goes through. I think this is great because I think this is awesome because what it does is that it shows you the point A from where Tanjiro starts, and then finally the point B to where he's at afterwards. So I think that that's awesome. Nezuko herself, and then there's Nezuko, who's Tanjiro's younger character. Nezuko is probably in the running to be the best girl of 2019. Despite the fact that she's mute and the fact that she has a muzzle on her almost the entire time she's on. But she's incredibly cute, and the relationship between Tanjiro and Nezuko is awesome, despite the fact that it's a one-sided verbal communication between the two of them, so that's awesome as well. The other two main characters that we run into are the two extra demon slayers that the two other demon slayers that Tanjiro allies himself with. And that's Inosuke and Zenitsu. Inosuke is this super feral demon slayer who wields a club and a cleaver in both. Who wields a club and a cleaver in both of his hands and has a little ox or boar mask on him at all times. And he's a super hothead. He's really fun on screen no matter what. Zenitsu is the other main character. He's the yellow hair guy that you see in the opening. He's a blast to listen to as well. He's super cowardly. He never takes anything too seriously. But without going into any spoilers, he actually has some of the coolest moments in the series so far. So I don't want to spoil too much about that. In terms of the villains, there's some villains of the week for the most part, but we have, interestingly enough, in the sixth episode, we've already run into the main villain, Muzan Kibutsuji, who is actually the progenitor demon and the one who's propagating the demonic curse. And he's a very, very terrifying main villain. He's a super terrifying main villain. And it's actually he's actually super interesting. His design is cool too. Even though he basically looks like Smooth Criminal Michael Jackson, which is kind of weird. I'd like to see more of him, and it's kind of weird that we've seen him so early in the series. That's it for characters. So art animation. So the art of the animation is helmed by the studio Ufotable. Ufotable is the main studio behind the Fate Stay Night series and Fate Zero. And for some reason, Ufotable always has the highest budget for everything. Ufotable, for some reason, just has the highest budget out of all the studios and is therefore able to put out some of the most beautiful looking animation styles that we've ever seen. The art style, like I said, looks fantastic too. Every single character looks very, very distinct in and of themselves, and the overall art style for the animation, it doesn't look nearly as crisp as Fate Stay Nights, but the overall designs still look fantastic as well. If there's an issue I have with the animation so far, is that the 3D... at times, Ufotable uses 3D models, and thus far, I have not been sold that anyone should use 3D modeling in an animation production to date. Pretty much every single time an anime has used 3D modeling, ever since the Full Metal Alchemist movie Conquer Shambhala, I have never been sold on 3D models in anime. Every single time it's been done poorly, or it's been done just fine. Berserk never could do it, Overlord could never do it, and Demon Slayer may be the best example of it so far, but even then I think it's a little weak. Even Attack on Titan has used 3D modeling, and even then I don't think it looks all that great. So that's the only problems I have with the animation. The music is fantastic too. The music is composed by Yuki Kaijira and Go Shina. Go Shina, you can tell if you know both of these two composers from their previous works. Go Shina was the main composer behind a couple of the Tales of games, particularly Tales of Legendia, and Yuki Kaijira is the one has been the one behind the Fate Zero soundtrack, and also was the main composer for Xenosaga Episode 2 and Episode 3. And you can definitely tell both of their influences in the soundtrack. Yuki Kaijira uses a lot of female vocals, uses a lot of female vocalizations with a lighter techno beat to her sounds, while Go Shina uses a straight-up orchestra for the most part, and the combination between those two is fantastic. I can't think of any specific track names just from the series alone, because I haven't listened to the soundtrack on its own yet, but from what I've heard so far, I do really enjoy the soundtrack. In terms of the overall enjoyability of the series, this series is easily probably my third favorite series that is running so far, and I can't wait to see more of it. I tune in every single Saturday for every new episode in Japanese, and I cannot wait to see where the series goes on. I think this is going to be a 26-episode long series, which thank goodness for that. I would have hated for this to have only been a 12-episode series, and then we waited a year for another 12. I'm glad that we're getting a huge bulk of it right now. Honestly, I wish all 26 episodes were out right now so I could just binge it all in one sitting. Because I really, really, really do enjoy this series. Again, it uses a lot of the same shonen tropes that most shonen use, but at the same time, it goes about it in a darker, more mature way that definitely makes it more unique. So I definitely recommend Demon Slayer so far. If you want to watch it legally, again, it's on Crunchyroll/Verve, and it's also on, the subtitle version is on Funimation now. So if you want to watch it, again, you can, like I said, you can get Verve, or you can get, if you're going to have Crunchyroll, you might as well get Verve. It's only like a couple bucks extra, and you get High Dive and a lot of other stuff too. You can't get Funimation, unfortunately. You could get, back in the day, about a year ago, Funimation was on the Verve app, but now you can't have Funimation on it. So if you want Funimation, you have to buy a subscription for it by itself. So if you definitely want to watch it, I would definitely get Verve. And as far as I know, I just recently heard about this while preparing for this podcast, but apparently the series is actually going to come out dubbed on Toonami this fall. So if you want to check it out dubbed, I have no idea what the English voice cast is so far. So if you want to check it out dubbed, if you want to wait long enough for the series, the Japanese version is probably going to be mostly done by the time it airs. So if you can wait that long for an English version, you can pick up the English version on Adult Swim whenever it airs. But if you want my personal take on it, I would watch it on Crunchyroll or Verve first. So, in conclusion, I'm going to go ahead and finish off today's podcast. So I gave you two different recommendations. I gave you the East 1 and 2 Chronicles for the PSP. You can also if you have Steam, you can also pick it up on Steam as well for about the same price. Again, it's Steam, so stuff always goes on sale on Steam anyways. I'm pretty sure there's a sale for it now. It's not a high demanding game whatsoever, so I'm pretty sure your PC could play it. And the anime for today was also Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba, a great shonen series with a nice dark undertone to it and enough subversions to it that help keep it nice and unique. So thank you so much for watching or listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed what you see here. If you did, please, there goes another hiccup. Excuse me. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to listen to the next episode or know when it comes out, please go ahead and please hit that ringer. Please hit the bell icon so you know whenever the new episode pops up every Friday at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And if you want to support this channel further, please feel free to go down to Patreon. Again, any little bit a month that you are willing to give helps out and helps this channel grow. So again, thank you so much for coming to today's podcast, and I hope to see you guys in the next episode.